Episode titled Shrinking Peppa. The morning began peacefully. Peppa woke up in her room beside George and noticed at once that her blanket seemed very big. Her pillow looked like a soft hill, and the edge of the bed felt a little higher than usual. Peppa thought she was only still sleepy, so she went downstairs for breakfast. In the kitchen, everything was normal. Mummy Pig was putting plates on the table, Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper, and George was holding his dinosaur. But when Peppa sat on her chair, her feet almost did not reach the floor. Daddy noticed it and said that maybe the chair had become taller. Everyone laughed a little, and the day went on. The next morning, Peppa was even smaller. Now her cup seemed large, the spoon felt heavy, and the door to the room looked much too tall. Mummy measured Peppa against the wall and made a pencil mark. The mark was lower than the old one, even though it should have been higher. Peppa began to worry. She tried to act normally. She played with George, looked at books, and helped Mummy. But everything around her kept becoming bigger. Toys felt heavy, stairs looked high, and Peppa's voice became quieter. George noticed that Peppa was almost the same size as his dinosaur, and he held the toy close. On the third day, Peppa could walk under the table almost without bending. The carpet looked like a huge, soft field, and the chair legs seemed like tall towers. Then she heard a quiet whisper from behind the cupboard. There was a small paper crown lying there. Peppa did not remember it. On the crown, it said, "The smaller you become, the closer the door is." Peppa did not understand what door it meant, but that evening, she noticed a tiny dark rectangle on the wall. It looked like a little door, only very small. Every day, as Peppa became smaller, the door seemed bigger to her. She understood that someone or something was waiting for her to become small enough to enter. Peppa was frightened, but she did not go closer. She told Mummy, but Mummy saw only a normal wall. Daddy did not notice anything either. Only George looked at the wall and stayed quiet, as if he could feel that something was there too. At night, Peppa woke up because of a soft knocking sound. The tiny door on the wall was open. A faint light came from inside, and behind it Peppa could see a room that looked like their house, only smaller and wrong. Inside stood another Peppa, very tiny. She waved her hand as if calling Peppa to come in. Peppa stepped back and accidentally stepped on the paper crown. At that moment, the little door began to tremble. George woke up, picked up the crown, and placed it on the old height mark on the wall. The room became brighter. The door began to shrink, and Peppa suddenly returned to her normal size. In the morning, everyone thought the strange day was over. Peppa could reach her mark on the wall again. But when she went to wash her face, she saw a tiny message on the mirror. "You have not reached the door yet." Episode titled Ghostly George. It was a normal day in the Pig family house. Mummy Pig was making breakfast. Daddy Pig was reading the newspaper, and Peppa and George were playing on the carpet. Peppa was building a tower from blocks, and George carefully rolled his dinosaur toward it. Everything was calm until George picked up a small red block and placed it on top of the tower. Suddenly, Peppa noticed that George had become pale. His hands and face looked transparent, as if light was passing through him. "George?" Peppa said, cautiously reaching out, but her fingers passed through him. George smiled, but his voice sounded faint and distant. Peppa was frightened but stayed close. She watched as George slowly glided across the carpet, leaving a faint glow behind him. At that moment, strange things began happening in the house. Blocks rearranged themselves, toys slid across the floor, as if someone was quietly playing with them. The lamp on the table flickered a few times, even though the switch was on. Peppa tried to touch George, but her fingers went through him. He lifted a small block and said softly, "Peppa, look." The block hovered in the air. then gently settled back in place. Peppa realized that George was still here, but not entirely. Mummy Pig came into the room and was surprised. "Why is it so quiet here?" She looked at George, but he seemed normal, playing on the floor. Only Peppa knew the truth. Daddy Pig joined them and said, "Children, remember to tidy up your toys," without noticing that George was semi-transparent. During the day, George glided through the rooms, passing through furniture and walls. Peppa followed him, trying to help. Sometimes the blocks arranged themselves into funny shapes. Sometimes soft footsteps could be heard in the living room, though no one was walking. Peppa and George laughed as they played, but George's laughter was faint and ghostly, coming from somewhere far away. In the evening, Peppa put George to bed. He hovered above the bed, and Peppa covered him with the blanket. At that moment, the toys on the floor began to move by themselves, forming little paths as if someone invisible was playing with them. Peppa reached for George's hand, and her hand passed through his. She whispered, "Do not be afraid, George." During the night, the house was quiet. Peppa woke to a soft creak. She looked at George. He was gliding along the ceiling, watching her. His eyes glowed in the dark, and his voice whispered, "I'm here, Peppa." The lamp flickered, blocks gently bounced, and shadows moved across the walls as if someone were walking through the room. In the morning, George was normal again. He sat on the floor, hugged his dinosaur, and laughed. Peppa sighed in relief, but when she looked at the blocks, they were arranged in the same strange patterns they had formed overnight. Peppa realized that even though George had become ordinary again, his ghostly play had left a mark.